So I think we have a good number and we may begin. To everybody that has joined us on this Saturday afternoon, thank you once again. And without taking too much time, I will be presenting Terry or Mr. Collingsworth of International Rights Advocates. IRA advocates have filed a forced child labor case against the likes of Apple, Alphabet, Dell, Microsoft, and Tesla for being implicated in the extreme abuse of children um, in the artisanal mining of cobalt in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This was done on behalf of 14 plaintiffs, and now I'll just let him take over from here. If you do have any questions during the presentations, please write them down, and at the allocated time, you may be allowed to ask it. Thank you, Terry. You can take the stage.
Thank you very much, and thanks everyone for joining this Saturday afternoon. I am the Director of International Rights Advocates, and we are working on a number of cases like this involving really crimes against human beings, crimes against humanity in the global economy. And unfortunately, there are too many of those going on right now, and very little has changed in the development of law. So we're trying to figure out creative ways to bring these companies to court and hold them accountable. The challenges are enormous, and we'll go through some of those. But I appreciate you spending your Saturday afternoon to learn a bit more about this, and hopefully we can figure out some creative things to do. What we discussed is we'll do this in two parts. I'm going to first give you a brief PowerPoint with some photos and explanations for how we have managed to bring this case and how we managed to meet the people in the Congo who are our clients and so on. We'll take a pause then to allow you to ask questions or raise issues, make observations, and then we'll go in to discuss some issues of how we can work together. What are some things that could be done to try to advance this cause, if you will, of getting the richest corporations in the world to stop using cobalt that is mined by children and adults who are routinely maimed and killed in the cobalt mines of the DRC. So I'm now going to share my screen and give you a presentation. So even this is my job. I pay attention to what is going on in the global economy. I try to follow any reports and look into them when I hear of particularly major corporations that are violating human rights in their supply chains or otherwise. And it was only fairly recently, maybe 2015 or 16, that I had heard about the fact that cobalt, which is a key component for every single one of the computers, phones, or electric vehicles, EVs, that we are all using in some way, requires cobalt, because the lithium-ion battery that is in all of these devices that recharges, that's the catch or the beauty of a lithium-ion battery, it recharges, they require cobalt, and most of the world's cobalt comes from the DRC, and a whole lot of that is produced and mined under horrible conditions. So the leading tech companies that we have sued, Apple, Alphabet, or Google, Dell, Tesla, Microsoft, and Tesla, they all claim, of course, and spend millions and millions of dollars to present to you an image of being futuristic, clean, woke, green, the future, and yet they're all using this cobalt that is mined by children. I'm going to show you a series of photos of the actual mining conditions in the DRC cobalt mines. So this first series shows children working in the mines. These are not our clients. These photos were taken by Professor Siddharth Kara, who brought me to the DRC when I first went, and he had been there previously and did research and took these photos. So the main thing to notice here is that the cobalt mines are open-faced strip mines, And the rock, as you can see, is very much like shale. It's soft and crumbly. So these kids and the adults who do this, they come upon a surface and they use shovels with no equipment. Notice how this boy has no helmet, no mask, nothing. And he's going to dig into this very soft rock and start tunneling in to get the cobalt. They usually work in teams of 4 or 5, and there'll be a couple of other guys that are bagging up the cobalt as it's pulled out, and then another guy who's running back and forth with the bags. And the thing about this tunnel, and I will get to my clients and what they've told me, but because of this photo, I want to emphasize that every single kid that I interviewed who's now part of this case, they told me that they knew about the mine collapses. They happen routinely. Everyone knew someone who had already been killed or maimed in a mine collapse. Every single one of these kids told me that when they climb in that tunnel, they know that that tunnel is going to collapse. They all do. The only question is it going to collapse while I'm in there? So if you can imagine a boy, 11, 12, 13 years old, who every day is going into that tunnel with that on his mind, that he could die today or he could lose his legs today. And all of my clients did. They either are kids who died or who were severely maimed because of the tunnel collapse. After the bags are filled, then other people carry the bags down from the mountain, and that's hazardous too. We had one boy who, these look like older folks, they're young men, but I had one boy of about 12 years old. He's walking down one of these ravines, and there's a tunnel underneath him, and the ceiling collapsed, and he fell down about 50 feet and was severely injured. The job they give to the very smallest kids is when the bags of cobalt reach the bottom, they have to be washed. So you'll see kids that are 8, 9, 10 years old down at the bottom washing. And I'm told that eventually when they get a little bigger, they'll be recruited to go back to the top and become miners. Just another picture of a boy about to go into one of these deadly tunnels. And here's a boy who can't be more than 6 or 7, 8 years old, who's being loaded up to make that hazardous trip down the mountain. These are kids that are, again, can't be more than 5, 6 years old, who are just picking up the scraps of cobalt rocks that are on the surface. And this photo, I don't know, I include it because it's the only photo showing any kind of a beam, but this beam is useless. It's not doing anything to support the mine. But it's just so primitive. This is Stone Age conditions with no safety precautions whatsoever to gather the cobalt for the most modern, fancy, futuristic, wealthy corporations that the world has ever seen. This juxtaposition is mind-boggling to me. So major media started exposing this problem right around 2015, 16. I will provide you with this PowerPoint if you'd like, so you could get these links if you're interested. But the Washington Post did a tremendous feature in 2016 with lots of photos, and they contacted the companies and asked them to explain what was going on. So an important part of our case is showing that the companies knew about this for a long time, and they sure did, well before this 2016 article. But from 2016 on, they absolutely knew, because they were contacted by major media reporters trying to get them to answer the question of what are they doing to make sure that there aren't children and adults being killed and maimed in their cobalt mining. In 2000, these are just a sampling of articles, but I will draw your attention to the 2018 article by Siddharth Kara in The Guardian. He went there for the first time to write this article, and then when he came back, he had all these photos, and he's one of the people that reached out to me asking if we could go back together in order to try to determine if we could bring a case to help these people who have been injured or killed in cobalt mining accidents. This 2016 Amnesty International report that was done in conjunction with a Congolese group called AfroWatch. This is the best amnesty report, and the amount of research that went into it is impressive. But this is the report that really gave us a boost in thinking that we could bring the case, because they identified supply chains and they went to the mining sites. They identified who were the major mining companies: Glencore, a Swiss company, and Huayu, a Chinese company. Those were the major companies. They then traced them back to who they supplied to, including these major tech companies, and asked the tech companies to respond to questions about what they were doing. And for the most part, the tech companies just blew them off. They either didn't respond or said, well, it's a very difficult thing, and they didn't give a straight answer. But reading that report really convinced me that we could trace the supply chains and that we could go to these companies and hold them accountable. These are just some quotes from the report. I just would highly, if you're interested in the topic, I would highly recommend going to the Amnesty report in person. But they really, usually Amnesty is quite neutral. They don't want to name names, and they want to try to present an objective story. But you could tell that they crossed the line here in the sense that there was no excuse for this. They were absolutely as infuriated as I was on my first trip there to find what we found. And they also note that the US Department of Labor, since the year 2009, the US Department of Labor annually, no matter who's the president, good or bad, they put out this report that identifies the worst forms of child labor. And so since 2009, they have identified cobalt production in the DRC as one of the areas, industries, and products that has children using or participating in very hazardous work. So one of the things that really astounded me is that Amnesty contacted these tech companies. And again, you think of Apple, Tesla, Dell, and so on. They do present themselves as different, like we are green, clean, as I mentioned earlier. But when they were asked to be accountable for what they were doing in their supply chains in the DRC, they responded like an oil company does. I've sued many oil companies for human rights violations, and what they did is exactly what these companies did as well. I call it the multinational playbook. They deny it first. They claim they have no control. They claim they're mere consumers of cobalt and they have no idea how it's mined. I don't even know where the DRC is. I just buy cobalt. And then they always conclude their remarks with, we are strongly opposed to child labor. And that's exactly what these companies did, every single one of them. So in September of 2019, after I reviewed and did as much research as I could on the issues, as I mentioned, Siddharth Kara came with me, and then Dr. Roger Claude Luwanga, who's a DRC national, currently teaching at Emory, and he's taught at a number of prestigious schools in the United States, and he's written extensively on human trafficking and forced labor in the DRC. We went to the DRC to investigate, again, the situation there and assess whether we could bring a legal case. We were working with a local organization, and we asked them to help identify families who had lost either a child who died in a mine collapse or had a child who had been seriously injured in a mine collapse, and was able to identify what mine it was so that we could do our supply chain tracing. And when I arrived there, I've been doing this work for over 30 years. When we arrived there, our local partner did such a terrific job that when we went to meet him and the people he had gathered, we went to a motel-like complex that was secure, well off the road. And I walked into this meeting room and I met about 50 people, and everyone was there because their child had either been killed or maimed, and the children who were injured were there too. And it was the most shocking meeting I ever had, that these folks, they had been devastated by what happened in those mines, and they had no other options. There's very poor medical care there. They don't have any money, or they wouldn't have their kids working in a mine for $1 a day and risking his life. It was horrible. And I met these people and I could just sense that we were their last hope, and that I had to either tell them I couldn't do this or that I thought I could help. And I'm glad that by the time we left, I felt fairly confident that we would be able to bring a case and help them. So I'm going to show you a few photos of my clients. We block their faces because they fear retaliation in the small communities where the mines are. This is one of our clients who had both of his legs smashed in a mine collapse. The one with the cast on is smashed so bad that they don't know that they can save it. And he has a steel rod in the other leg and will never walk again. If they can save the other leg, he at least has a chance of being able to get around on crutches, eat more easily. This is a more typical wound where the leg was smashed, it healed back, but this boy also can't walk well anymore and is really traumatized by having been buried in a mine, but he lived. This boy had both of his legs smashed in a mine collapse, and this was the highest level of medical care that he could get in Congolese, a pair of old leg braces that probably aren't doing him much good, but that's what he left the hospital with. This boy woke up after being buried alive in a mine collapse, and his leg had been amputated. And these are, we represent, I miscounted when I first provided the facts to you. So we actually have 16 plaintiffs in total. 11 of them are kids like this who have themselves been seriously injured, but they survived. And then we have 5 others who are parents of a child who was killed in a mine collapse. So when we got back, I was unbelievably motivated that I wanted to quickly get this case on file and get things moving along. So I put together the case and we got it filed in federal court here in Washington, D.C. And I want to stress that we picked 5 companies: Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft, Dell, Tesla, and Google. Google's part of Alphabet. These were the companies that we were able to document while in the DRC had mining relationships with Huayu and or Glencore, and that each of the kids that we now represent was killed or maimed in one of the mines, either owned and operated by Glencore or Huayu. Every single other company that uses Cobalt, like Samsung or any EV companies, every EV company, all the car companies now are making EVs, Ford, Daimler, BMW. We just didn't finish or get to the supply chain mapping yet, but I fully expect to have an amended complaint at some point where we add additional defendants. These just happen to be the ones that we were able to initially document and have an absolute confidence that we have the supply chain properly mapped and that they are responsible for the injuries to our clients. So we did file the case, and in federal court, you get a random selection of judges. We got a recent Trump appointee named Carl Nichols. We don't know much about him as a judge. He's very new, but he was a corporate lawyer for many years and is a very smart, well-educated. So I hope that we got through to him that we really satisfied the legal issues that are required. The companies filed a motion to dismiss the case. And they all filed together. They joined together, although they each hired a giant law firm to represent them. So that we have 5 giant, the biggest corporations in the world. They each hired one of the most giant law firms in the world, and they all joined together and filed a joint motion to dismiss. That means that they're arguing that even if everything we say is true, that we can't possibly sue them. They can't possibly, under the law, be responsible. So all the briefing was completed on December 16th, 2020, and then the court called an in-person hearing on July 8th, just a few months ago. And we had an argument for about 3 hours. And I think we did a good job of presenting to the court what the facts were and why they lead to responsibility for these companies. We're in the range now where we should get a decision fairly soon, and that's really, for us, the most important development. If we win this motion, so the decision the court has is, can they go forward to trial, or am I going to throw the case out because they can't possibly hold these companies accountable? If we win, we then get what is called discovery. We get to take depositions of all of the executives of these companies. We get to get all of their documents. We get all of their supply chain materials, all of their internal reports about what they knew and when they knew it. So that in itself would be a huge win for us. If we lose and the judge says, I don't think you can legally sue these people for these harms, then we'll appeal immediately to the DC Court of Appeals, which is one of the better courts in the country. And I think we'll do fine there too. So that's what's coming up in the status of the case. I want to go through, just so you understand, what are the basic issues. I won't get all legalese on you. I just want to explain what are the 3 elements that I think we have adequately, more than adequately established. But I want to stress that during the 3 hours of the argument, about the only thing we heard out of the mouths of the company's lawyers is this theme that they're not responsible for what happens in the DRC mines. They're just buying cobalt. And then I kept emphasizing, and our major theme is that these companies, they tell you, the consumer, they tell the regulators, they tell Congress, that they have strong policies against child labor that applies to their suppliers. So we quoted those policies in our briefs, showing that Apple, Tesla, all of them have policies that guarantee you, the consumer, that they don't allow child labor in any aspect of their supply chain. So how can they say that they're not responsible at all for what happens in a mine where they're getting their cobalt in the DRC, but at the same time that they have a policy that prohibits child labor in that mine, and that they are doing everything they can to enforce that policy? So they're lying, and that is the lie, I hope, that ultimately hangs them. I just pick on Microsoft here because I thought that they were particularly bad in their representation. So again, they say in the middle of the page here, this was a press release they issued after we sued them. We are committed to responsible and ethical sourcing of materials and do not tolerate child labor in our supply chain. That's what they're telling everyone in the world, but they went to the judge and said, but we don't have anything to do with what's going on in the mines. So just briefly, under the law we're using, it's called the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. And it was amended recently to really open the door for these kinds of supply chain cases. The statute was originally passed as a criminal statute primarily to target sex trafficking. So that's great, because it means that the people who drafted it understood how criminals work, how sex trafficking criminals work. They don't have a written contract. They probably don't even ever meet each other directly, but they're working together for a common venture that they're all profiting from. So, for example, in Thailand, there's a ring of traffickers who, under usually false pretenses or by force, capture young girls from Thailand and then they bring them somewhere else, sometimes Cambodia, sometimes the United States, Europe, and then they are transferred to people there who take them and make them go to work as prostitutes or in strip clubs or anything of that sort. The traffickers probably never met the guys who are going to put the girls to work, but they're all profiting from a common venture, which is taking these girls and essentially enslaving them and forcing them into prostitution or other illegal acts. So the drafters of the statute understood that, and then they expanded it beyond sex trafficking to allow really any supply chain type issue to be addressed. So the statute is very broad. And so the three basic elements, I will go through them one by one, is first, you have to knowingly benefit from participation in a venture. So the first question is, well, what's a venture? Again, because the drafters understood that the people might never meet, and they're certainly not going to have a written contract for trafficking girls. So they defined venture very broadly to be a non-contractual association in fact. And so we allege here that we have even more than that because, for example, Apple has a direct contract with Huayu and Glencore. They're getting Cobalt from them, and they've told us that that contract includes a term that prohibits child labor. So it's more than just an association. In fact, they didn't just meet or talk on the phone and have some agreement. They actually have an agreement, and it's been going on for years. So we definitely have a venture. And the companies knowingly benefit from this because they are getting a steady source of cheap cobalt that they know is mined by children and adults who are working under these horrific conditions. So I think that we have easily satisfied this. Now, in terms of the law, there are some great cases consistently holding that hotel chains like Hyatt and Hilton and so on, they have been consistently held liable for allowing a particular hotel to operate prostitution rings at the hotel. So what typically happens is that if there's a franchisee or a manager of a hotel in, let's say, Las Vegas that Marriott owns, and that manager is letting people come in to use rooms for prostitution. You'll have to excuse me, my computer is making some airplane, my server is making an airplane noise in the background. It'll stop in a second. I'll speak a little bit louder. The courts consistently have held that the hotel chain knew or should have known that that particular hotel is being used for prostitution and allowed the victim of that prostitution to sue the hotel. And they've won. They're doing very well in those kinds of cases. So we think we have way more than that in terms of the connection between the bad acts and the child slavery or forced child labor going on in the mines. The second element is there has to be forced labor. And this is probably the most challenging issue that we faced because the kids aren't rounded up by gunpoint and they go home every night. But the case law is pretty clear that if they felt coerced and they were, say, rounded up and directed to work by an adult that they feared, then that is forced labor. And that's what happened here. Virtually all of these kids were essentially recruited by an agent of one of the mines. The kids would go out, hang out at the mine, yes. And then some guy would come and gather up 5 or 10 of them and put them to work, told them what to do, and also threatened them and said, if you don't do what I say, you're going to starve because you're never going to work again and you'll never work in this town again and so on. So there's good case law on that type of situation where the question is, would a reasonable person in the shoes of the kid feel like they had no choice? And they take into account age, education, level of sophistication, and so on. And all of our kids would pass that test easily. They felt that once they were there, they were following the orders of someone. And if you think about it, no one would voluntarily climb into a tunnel knowing that it could kill them unless they felt they had no choice. Sorry. And then the third element is simply that the companies have knowledge or should have known or recklessly disregarded what was happening in the cobalt mines. And again, we have a number of sources here. One, of course, is that they were notified by the media going back till at least 2016. And two, we know that these companies, these are trillion-dollar companies. They have their own departments in charge of corporate social compliance. They've had people look at this issue. And in the case of Apple, we actually have a whistleblower in the wings who said she raised the issue with Apple that there were children getting killed and maimed in cobalt mines in the DRC. And they didn't do anything, and she kept pressing them, and they fired her. They gave her a nice severance package and made her sign a non-disclosure agreement, which we can pierce. But that we know that each of these companies had some kind of department that was looking at this because that's their job. So we think we easily satisfy that. And then we also add what are called common law claims against the companies in addition to the trafficking statute for unjust enrichment, which means the companies took advantage of a situation and enriched themselves at the expense of an innocent party, here the kids. And there's a tort called negligent supervision. The companies actually had a duty once they had knowledge of what was going on to make sure that it stopped. And then intentional infliction of emotional distress, which is based on the fact, as I mentioned earlier, each of these kids told me that when they climbed in that tunnel, they knew it was going to collapse. And the question was, would it be while I'm in it? And if you can imagine the stress that caused every one of these kids every single day, that is just unbelievable. So those are the claims. There's been good media response, and we're going to talk a little bit later about what else to do. But even there's a link here to a Fox Business story. Even Fox Business found this to be just absolutely outrageous that these companies were knowingly benefiting from this forced child labor of kids who were getting killed and maimed in the name of getting cheap cobalt for the richest companies in the world. Just wanted to briefly discuss what our goals are. First, we need to help the children and the families who've been injured. And the only tool we have for that is compensation. So we hope to get some money to not only these families, but we've made it a class action and hope to help every family that had a child killed or maimed in the cobalt mines for these companies. We want to get these companies to use some of their trillions of dollars that they boast about having to clean up their mess. We're going to talk a little bit later about some of these companies are trying to cut and run, but they have to clean up their mess. You don't go into an area and devastate it and then say, oops, we're sorry, we won't do it again, and then just leave. They have to clean up their mess. And then because these companies are so successful and so wealthy, we really need to make them do more than normal even to clean this mess up and to make sure that people understand that no matter how great your product is, your Apple iPhone is a miracle, that does not excuse the kind of horrendous behavior. So we want them to get a reputation check. We want everyone to know what happened so that these companies will be held appropriately accountable. One of the ideas out there is to set up a monitoring program. There's one called Good Weave in the hand-knotted carpet industry of South Asia. And that is an excellent program that set up an independent entity that does monitoring of the looms there, and it would be the mines here, and make sure that there aren't children working. And then in return, the companies get to say that they have been inspected and that they are child labor free, and that's a value that you would get to it. I would say that this cobalt mining area outside of Kolwezi in the DRC would be very easy to properly monitor because it's geographically limited. And as I showed in the earlier pictures, these are open pit mines. So if we could get these companies, instead of lying about what they're doing, to actually take responsibility. Can you imagine if you had Apple and Tesla's gadgets to fly drones or put a satellite up there? You could watch every single one of these mines every single day, 24/7, and make sure there aren't children climbing in and out of those holes. And each of these companies could afford to contribute to this kind of program, and they could also support rehabilitation programs for the children and adults who have been injured to date. What we need to make this work is consumer demand. And again, we're going to talk about that a bit more too. I also wanted to flag that we haven't filed it yet, but there's also a law called the False Claims Act, and it allows injured people, so these are the plaintiffs, to file a claim bringing to the attention of the US government that a government contractor is using forced or child labor. That's a specific term in every government contract, that you are prohibited from using forced or child labor in the implementation of the contract. So we need to show first that a company is a government contractor and that the product that they are selling to the government involves the use of forced or child labor. So we're going for our first case. It's finished. We're just going to file it fairly soon now. We're going against Dell. Dell has $2.78 billion worth of government contracts right now to supply computers to the US government. In fact, in the courthouse where we argued the motion that we just had on July 8th, every single computer in there was a Dell computer. So we're going to go after Dell first and demonstrate that their products use forced labor. I think we've already proved that. And that is an automatic violation of their contracts. And it gives the government the authority to fine them $10,000 per incident. And it also gives the government the authority to cancel the contract. So we think we go after their money, that'll get their attention in a whole different way. And I just want to stress that one of the barriers we're facing here is that electric vehicles in particular are being touted as the golden solution to our problems, whether it's Joe Biden or Greta Thunberg's claiming that EVs are the answer to our dreams. We need these environmental activists, well-meaning environmental activists, to understand that the source of the energy for these EVs is cobalt, and that right now cobalt is about as dirty a product as you can imagine. It not only kills and maims the miners, but it's environmentally hazardous. It destroys the vegetation. Cobalt mining is strip mining. There are chemicals leached into the water supply. It is a respiratory hazard to breathe in cobalt dust. So there's a lot of work to do before we can say EVs are the answer. So that's our explanation of the case. I want to make sure you all know that you can go to our website, iradvocates.org, for updates and additional information. We have on there a card that gives you the emails for the 5 companies. And so what we ask people to do is go on there, get this information, and write to these companies and say you're not going to get a new product from them until you're sure that they're not using cobalt that is mined by forced or child labor, and ask them to help fix it. And you can also go there to help support our efforts at iradvocates.org. I have to stress that we're not asking you or anyone to take your iPhone and throw it in the river. I have an iPhone. I got it before I knew all of this, but still, we can't not be in communication with the world because these are bad companies. I think we have to use their tools against them. But I think it's a fair ask to say, I'm not going to upgrade to whatever we're at now, iPhone 50, without knowing that Apple cleaned up its act. So we're asking people, don't upgrade your gadgets. Just hang on to them and make sure that you're telling the company you won't buy a new one until you hear that they have fixed this problem. So we're going to pause there and take time for questions and discussions about the case. And then from there, we're going to have a discussion about what else can we do as a community? What are some steps we can take in terms of press, lobbying? What can we do in the Congo itself? And other issues. But let's stop here and ask if you have any questions or comments about the case and its implications and what is going on right now in the DRC.
Feel free to mute yourselves or put your questions in the comments box.
Go for it.
I think I'll go first, Terry, because I see that Alidor is trying to say something, but it doesn't. He's trying to get his unmute button. Right, Alidor? Are you going first, Alidor? I can let you go. You go ahead, Alidor. You were first.
Go ahead, Albert.
No. You open up because I see that you're first before me, so I can see. You go ahead. I'll come after you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I would like first of all to thank you very much, Terry, for the wonderful job you are doing to help kids in the DRC. My first question is, I wonder if you could tell us what was done with the Congolese government to get them involved in this issue and to help you in what you are doing to help child in the mining exploitation.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. Well, I don't mean to personally disparage the government of the DRC, but my local team and others that I spoke to about the situation advised me not to get the government involved because many government officials are on the payroll of the big mining companies, including Glencore and Huayu, and that they might actually work against us and might even make me leave the country should they become aware that we were investigating Glencore and Huayu. It's certainly no secret that Glencore in particular is being investigated by both the British Foreign Office and the US Department of Justice for bribery related to getting cobalt concessions from the government of the DRC. There's a whole lot of writing on that, and I think that's probably a fact. Further, when we needed just the cooperation of the mining ministry to get information about who owned what mines, who operated what mines, that was extremely difficult. They really did not want to cooperate. So I followed the advice of my colleagues and didn't directly tip my hand, did not directly bring the government into our investigation, but we are now. I mean, they are following the lawsuit, and there are people who are trying to pressure the government to do more itself to enforce their written laws. I mean, there's perfectly fine law against child labor in the DRC. There's a perfectly fine law written on paper about mine safety issues, but there's absolutely no enforcement as far as anyone could point out to me. So that's a sad fact, but it's one of the things that I think can be done. Like, I'm not a citizen of, or really have no business telling the DRC government what to do, but folks who are DRC nationals, that is something that we hope people can do more of, to hold the government accountable for its failure to protect its children. And that reminds me of one thing I didn't mention, that 100% of the children that I represent, they were in school, and then the government imposed a $6 a month school fee to remain in school. And they all said that they had to drop out of school because they couldn't pay the $6 a month. So there's one issue that seems pretty clear, that the government should not have done that. And I realize the government probably has resource issues, but it wasn't a solution to essentially throw a bunch of kids who didn't have $6 a month out into the street, and their choices of what to do next were pretty limited. Go to the mines or work on a farm, but that was about it, they told me. Those were their options.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. I noticed that the majority of the mining company targeted in this case are the US company. But we all well know that the majority of the company that the mining company that are exploiting in the DRC are registered here over here in Canada because of the Toronto mining stocks. I wonder if is there something, if you can tell us if there is something that we can do over here in Canada, you know, to extend this case to include also some Canadian company that are involved in exploiting child, you know, in the eastern part of the DRC.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. We hear our Supreme Court, as many of you know, is extremely right-wing now, very conservative court. And one of the things they've done is made it harder, if not impossible, for us to sue foreign corporations here in the United States. So you're absolutely right that we could not reach out to foreign mining companies and foreign tech companies that do not have either a headquarters in or a major presence in the United States. So that limited what we could do. But yes, the law in Canada, I can't cite the case as I sit here, but I know for a fact that there is a case that recently allowed some lawsuits to proceed in mining conditions in, I think it was Papua New Guinea. But the Canadian Supreme Court has recognized a right to sue for international human rights violations under Canadian law. I am working with a Canadian law firm on a different issue, which is child slavery in cocoa harvesting in Cote d'Ivoire, which is another serious problem that is going on in the global economy and in East Africa. So they were working on that case first, but I have mentioned to them the prospect of doing this. And if they're not able to do it, I hope they can refer us to another law firm. And if any of you are aware of a law firm in Canada that might be willing to take this on, I think there's great potential there, yes. Thank you for that question, though. That's a real possibility.
My pleasure.
Mr. Albert, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. Thank you very much for the presentation. The question is just this. I know this has been going on for years, for a long time. So one question is that maybe you might have spoken about it, how you got interested actually in this case, and I think you made note of that. But I'm also cognizant of the fact that you are going up against giants, multi-million, multi-billion companies. So are there other companies there in the US that are also, so to speak, supporting your cause? Because I could be wrong, but you know, your own organization may not have as much money than the other side, right? So you're going up against a Goliath, so to speak, right? So as the Bible says. So yeah, that would be interesting. Just maybe you can explain if indeed you have other corporate backing of this, cognizant of the fact that yes, leveraging the media, going to the interview, setting up the stage and people standing up on the road with stuff to make sure that people are aware is another way. So that is one thing. That's just one question. The other question is that, okay, while the case is going on, have those same companies that you're suing, have they somehow through back channel perhaps approach you and the organization to see what can be done to improve things locally, pay their families, whatever, build schools and so on? And so those are my two questions, and I wanted to just make sure maybe you can cover that for me. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, you very astutely recognize that, yes, the battle of resources is just tremendously challenging. And I would say Elon Musk probably spends more on a year on butlers than we bring in a year for our budget. So they're tremendously, the world has never seen corporations this rich, trillion-dollar corporations that are, instead of working with us to fix the problem, are hired giant lawyers. And I have to mention that if you're a giant law firm that gets hired by Tesla or Google or Apple to defend their interest in this case, you suddenly have, in my experience, these lawyers have a conflict of interest because they charge by the hour. And at these big firms now, a senior partner gets $1,000, $1,200, $1,300 an hour to represent the companies. So their goal is to make this last for 15 years. My goal is to solve the problem immediately. And often there's a problem of getting the company to realize what its goal is, because their own lawyers are telling them, whispering in their ear, don't worry, we're going to win this. You don't need to worry about this case at all. We're going to win it. Well, maybe, maybe not. But in the meantime, you're spending a lot of money on lawyers that could be helping people. That's always my public message to the companies. Once I've sued them, under our ethical laws, I cannot contact the company directly. I have to go through their lawyers. So we do try to get out a public message that we're interested in fixing this, and that before they spend $50 million, $100 million on their own lawyers, why don't we see if we can fix it? But to answer the second part of your question, not yet. I think that their lawyers have told them, let's see what happens with this first motion to dismiss. And if we win that, we're good. If we lose it, then maybe we'll talk. That's my speculation. No one has informed me of that. But in terms of the resource battle, they need a lot more money than we do because they're paying their lawyers $1,200, $1,500 an hour. And we are experts in this area of law. So far, I mean, they filed a brief. I thought it was a terrible brief, but we filed one I thought was better. But so far, we're evenly matched because I think our experience and expertise outweighs how many lawyers they put in a room to talk about this. If we win, however, then the real economic challenges kick in because we'll be taking depositions, we'll be traveling all over the place to take those depositions, we'll be reviewing millions of pages of documents. So then we will need resources, and we're working on that. I have some good sources that I usually go to. We do not have any corporate backing. Most corporations want us to lose because they're afraid that we'll turn whatever victory we have here onto them. We are hoping at some point that one of the tech companies, whether a defendant or not, will say, you know, we ought to just try to set a good example. Why don't we fix this and look good compared to the others instead of being one of 5 companies that are trying to litigate this case and never help the children that we know were maimed and killed. But we always manage to come up with resources. We have some foundations, we get other law firms to help. But that, I always say, that's a problem I look forward to having. If we need more resources, it's going to be because we won the first step in the case. And I'm confident, based on discussions I've already had, that we'll get those resources behind us quickly to then take the case to the next stage.
Well, thank you, Terry. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Terry, I think there's some questions in the chat box.
And I'm trying to find that chat box. Okay, I see it, but I don't see where the questions are. Could you possibly just read me the questions?
For sure.
Yes,
Just
thank
a
you.
second. Okay, so the first question is, have you tried to bring this information to the government? I'm not sure if this is the US government, because you already answered pertaining to the Congolese government.
Yes.
Maybe
As to-
please
Yeah,
answer in terms
that
of the
question
US.
been answered.
Okay, okay.
But as to the US government, we have brought this to their attention, and they know from their prior reports of the Department of Labor that this is going on. And I think there's stuff the US government can do in terms of putting some pressure and offering to cooperate with the government of the DRC. But so far, we've seen no concrete action being taken by the US government.
Thank you. The next is, those people work in those mines to feed their children. Do you think bringing them other ways to provide for their family could work?
Absolutely, that is really the biggest challenge that we have, that each of the kids essentially was faced with a choice of working or starving. Some of the kids had their fathers killed in the same mining accident, so they became at age 11 or 12 the primary breadwinner for a family. So we definitely need a way to address the economic crisis that is going on in these areas of the DRC. A related question is, what's a reasonable thing to ask the companies to do? That was going to be on one of our discussion points, but it'd be good to hear thoughts or questions about it now. The mining companies, particularly Glencore and Huayu, they're looking like they're going to implement a cut and run policy. By that, I mean, they're going to just close down and industrialize all of the remaining artisanal mines. I'm hearing rumors of that. And so their response is going to be, all right, you know, like kids getting killed in the mines, we're going to just close the mines and we'll use bulldozers wherever we can, but we're just not going to participate in that anymore. And we have emphatically said, no, that's not the answer. You can't unemploy people. You need to make these jobs good jobs. So in addition to providing economic alternatives, which I don't have the power to do, but all of these UN agencies that waste so much money doing nothing, they ought to have a focused program on this kind of a crisis, which is keeping these kids out of the mines and giving them a chance. But at the same time, these giant mining companies that have been benefiting tremendously from their ability to get contracts in the DRC, often with corruption, and making tremendous amounts of money with their monopoly on cobalt coming from the DRC, they have an obligation to fix this too and make the jobs real jobs. Any country in the world that is operating under the rule of law effectively has mine laws, health and safety laws that are enforced, minimum age, minimum wage laws that are enforced. And we need that transformation to occur here so that an adult miner working for Glencore in a mine there is making a decent living to support his family, that has safety equipment so he's not being killed or maimed to go to just for working, et cetera. These companies could easily do that. It's done all over the world. No one's made them do it yet. And I'm hoping that part of the result of a successful case will be that the Apples and Teslas are going to go to Huayu and Glencore and say, we can't buy your cobalt until we clean this up and fix it and do it right. That's our real hope here.
Thank you so much for that answer. And the next question is, what is the Congolese government involvement to help resolve the issue? And I think that was answered already.
Yes.
I think that's it for questions.
Okay. Are there other questions, or we can go into the next part of the agenda? And Ruth,
I
maybe.
have a question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, is there any expectation from the Congolese diaspora in the US or anywhere in the world? Is there something that you expected that the Congolese diaspora can can do to support the job that you are doing for the Congolese child?
Excellent question. Thank you. And that was one of our discussion points. You know, yes, in the sense that individual organizations, including yours, what's happening in Congo, have reached out to me and I'm having discussions with them. But what I would really like to see is some, and I don't know who's best placed to do it, but to have some unification occur to focus on this one issue, to have the different groups that are interested come together and realize some additional power and leverage from being united and discussing what are some of the things that they can do to help, particularly with the government of the DRC, but also as a block of organizations to contact the companies and demand that they take responsibility for what they're doing. I think those are two things that easily come to mind, as well as working together, perhaps in a lobbying effort with the U.S. Congress to take action. So I leave it to you, or maybe some future and further discussion as to who's best placed to do that. I don't think I am. I'm not well connected with the community. Only when people contact me am I able to say basically what I'm saying to you is I'd love to help any effort that is bringing people together into a larger block to be able to have a bit more leverage to get some things done on this issue quickly.
Yeah,
So
it's Albert here. I'm sorry, the other thing I was going to ask, do you have any lawyer, Congolese or expatriate Congolese American, whatever have you, in your team?
We worked initially with Dr. Lwanga, who is at Emory Law School, as I said. He was part of our research team, but I really haven't pressured him to do more, in the sense that he did what we originally agreed he would do. And he has a number of other commitments, but we definitely need someone like that, someone who has some political connections and knowledge on the ground to maybe be the catalyst to organize the community. We're working, I don't want to say working with, we're collaborating with the group that did the amnesty report, AfroWatch, to try to gather a bit more of a community in the DRC. I think they're doing great work, but that is another problem that we wanted to discuss, is what are the prospects for and how would we go about organizing some kind of grassroots movement in the DRC. I think, as you know, there aren't a lot of NGOs that are working on this or any other issue. It's very hard to do that in the DRC. But I think to have the diaspora outside of the country work together to unify and then maybe help or work with groups in the DRC to form and focus to get this problem identified and solved would be an excellent thing. I know it's easier said than done, but I would say I can't imagine a more important issue, because it brings together all of the elements of a tremendous problem in the DRC, which is the multinational companies are doing whatever they want without accountability. There's either the government officials who are on the payroll or the companies themselves are taking all of the resources, the profits, the benefits of this giant mining operation, and it's leaving the country. It's not developing. There's no development going on in the mining communities for the people. It's all just enriching the few people who are in charge of and are benefiting from the system. So this can be a metaphor, an example of what is wrong with the economic system that we have, and how do you fix it? Well, you got to bring the community together. You got to build allies that can help outside and start demanding that your needs are taken care of.
Thanks, Terry. Sorry, Alidor.
Yeah, we will think about Terry and see what we can do to help, for the issue.
That would be great. That would be great. And then, okay, any other questions? And then we have a few other bullet points to hit here.
It's okay for
I
me.
think we can proceed.
Okay. Well, Ruth and I came up with a list of issues that we thought should be addressed. I don't know, Ruth, do you want to hit the issues and then, or you want me to? I'm happy to do it either way.
I'll let you do it. You're doing so well that.
Okay, well, thanks. I'm talking too much, but I'm hoping to get input from people. Well, one of the issues we've touched on is just what was the reaction of the companies? And I mentioned that they reacted just like oil companies. And so that means that they're not fearing the consumers or they're not fearing the grassroots organizations. They think that they don't matter. And so I just would again stress that you go on to our website and you'll see this card that has direct email addresses for all of the companies, and get as many people as you can in your own networks to tell the companies that doing nothing is not acceptable, that they have to accept responsibility and use some of their tremendous resources to fix the mess that they've caused. And to do that in a unified way would be even better. And then the next issue that we identified is the press, and exactly the same kind of theme is the press. They interview me, I tell them what's going on in the case, but they view me now as an interested party. I'm a lawyer for the plaintiffs in a case that we're trying to win. And so we need other people to be interacting with the press, to talk about what the DRC is like, to talk about how devastating a situation like this is for the communities that are there, and to tell the more human side of it from an objective perspective. So to the extent that anyone has experience or connections with the press to try to raise the profile of this issue, that would be extremely helpful. And I can feed you facts if you want any help in terms of what exactly is going on, what are the issues, who are the plaintiffs, any questions like that I can ask, but to have it be coming from your community rather than my community, I think would be tremendously helpful. I will mention, speaking of press though, that I have been working with a team from the BBC World Service, and they've done a 30-minute film. They went to the Congo, they interviewed a few of my clients, they've interviewed some of the mining companies, and they've interviewed me, and they believe that story, that the film will be out on November 17th. So keep your eyes peeled, but if I get a more precise date and time, I'll let your organization know. I think that's going to be an effective piece that will then probably create an opportunity for more media discussion. Then the next issue we identified was lobbying. I'm not very good at that because I'm not that patient, but to the extent that any of you have experience or an inclination, that's another area where I think if the community united a bit, so instead of getting 20 different emails from 20 different people, a member of Congress, a senator, can hear from one united group with a united demand, which is take some action on this issue. What can we do to encourage you to take action on this issue? I have, I'm only aware of one senator who has, well, reached out to me on this issue, and that's John Ossoff, the newly elected and soon to be challenged. No, that he's not the one going to up for re-election. One of the new Senate Democrats from Georgia. He's the chair of the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations of the U.S. Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs. He had his senior counsel, Daniel Eisenberg, reach out to me, And they're thinking about hearings on the issue, and I gave him some information, but I think that's probably a fruitful contact, and I'm going to continue to be in contact. But I think I can send to you the contact information and maybe wait a bit to see where what the next development is. But I think they're going to convene a hearing on the issue, mainly from the perspective of the human rights violations, I hope. But there is interest in the issue. The problem is, as you know, there's too many other issues going on in our Senate right now, so we're not first in line. But once the budget issues get cleared up, I hope we can have a chance to discuss this very solvable problem with members of Congress. So I guess the last issue that, again, we've already responded to in questions is that really we need this grassroots organizing in the Congo, and we need grassroots organizing of the diaspora to be on the same page in presenting this as a problem that can be solved, and if it is solved, a problem that can serve as a model for solving many similar problems in the economic system. And that's what I would leave you with in terms of urging you to come together and figure out how best to do that. So I'll stop there and see if there's any further questions or comments, and hope that we can continue to work to unify the community with a common demand to fix this problem.
Hello, can I be heard?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for this, Mr. Collingsworth. I don't know if you heard about the case that happened with Mr. Steven Donziger in his case against Chevron. This strikes a lot of similarities to me. And I wanted to know, because in his case, he basically, the U.S. justice system was used against him in a retaliatory effort with the help mainly by a specific judge who appointed, I believe, a law firm that also represents Chevron to prosecute Mr. Donziger. I wanted to ask you, what have the structural or corporate impediments been to your specific investigation? Because you did say that these companies have reacted in a way that an oil company such as Chevron would react. So what have been the structural impediments that you see now or you could foresee in the future?
Thank you. Thank you very much. For those of you who don't know the basic story, thank you, Peter. Steven Donziger is a friend of mine, and I'm actually speaking to him constantly about what he's going through and what might be done. Steven Donziger was the lead lawyer in a case against Chevron for polluting the rainforest in Ecuador. He won a judgment against them for $7.86 billion, which the court first doubled as punitive damages, so 16 plus billion. Then an appeals court reduced it to 7.86 billion. And now with interest accruing, it's a little over $9 billion that this judgment is against Chevron. So Steven did a tremendous job to get that done in Ecuador. And so Chevron and its lawyers, they hired one of the most notoriously horrible, awful, unethical law firms on the face of the earth, Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher, and they sat around a table and they said, well, we have a judgment against us for 9.86 billion. So we'll spend anything less than that to not pay the judgment. So they've just pulled out the stops and have done everything imaginable to try to prevent Steven from collecting. And they've demonized him and turned a federal judge into really a member of their team and so on. It's a horrible thing. So that is now a phenomenon of our global economy litigation, is that they often target the lawyer. I personally have been sued for RICO and defamation by a coal company called Drum and Coal because I had witnesses in Colombia that had been threatened by paramilitary groups. And so I moved them to a safe location, and they converted that into accusing me of bribing the witnesses and on and on. That's something to expect now. So the only thing so I have not yet experienced any of that in this case because we're too early on. Like, I think the companies are going to wait to see what happens in the motion to dismiss. If we win and we're going to get access to their information and get to depose Elon Musk and Tim Cook, then I don't know, let's see what they come up with. But the only thing you can do is protect yourself, to be super careful about making sure there's no ambiguity in what you say. Like, if I say I'm going to help a witness, that could be construed as bribe a witness. So I have to say I'm going to relocate a witness to save his life, because they're all listening and you just have to be careful. I have learned a few lessons in all these years in terms of how to do that. And I tell my staff, if you're going to communicate with each other, in any kind of setting, including emails, make sure you don't mind if that email ends up on the front page of the New York Times, because these days you just never know who's surveilling you. So with these tech companies, I'm particularly sensitive. I'm sure that the people who I have my email account with, Google, could get my account pretty easily. But we're just being careful, and I hope that we don't have to confront those kinds of problems. I think that the fact is that economic power of this nature is dangerous, and you have to be careful just to make sure you don't give them any ammunition to be able to credibly accuse you of anything. Someone asked in the chat, do I fear for my life? No, I'd have to say, I think that that's probably would have been a more 1960s thing to do. I think they have more creative tools to use against someone like me now, including what happened to Stephen. So I'd be more expecting that kind of pushback if one of the companies wanted to go into the dirty tricks business. But at this point in the litigation, I'm still hoping that we win the first round, and at least one of the companies will decide it's in their interests, both in terms of doing the right thing, but also in terms of looking good in the global economy to do the right thing. I know that's naive for now, but I'm going to continue to hope for that until I have concrete reasons to think otherwise.
Terry, quick question. These companies, I don't think that they're just operating in DRC. They are probably in other parts of the world as well. Have you ever looked into how they are operating elsewhere? And in other words, if child exploitation is happening in DRC only, for instance, why is it that it's different, let's say, other part of the world where they're operating? Is that because of non-existent mining expectations or rules of the laws? So I'm just trying to get a sense of why that is, because one would think that in order to be an exemplary company, one will operate throughout the world in the same way, with the same values and ethics, with the same principles. So I'm just trying to find out if DRC is the only place they're operating, therefore, everything is given to them, or they're just doing different things at different location based on the rules of law in those locations. So maybe you can just tackle that for us, Terry. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. The one solid rule in my experience of the global economy, and someday I'll etch this in granite somewhere, hopefully not on my headstone, is that companies will do whatever they can get away with where they are. Companies will do whatever they can get away with where they are. So like garment companies or shoe companies, they had the luxury of choosing where to go. I chased Nike. That was my first campaign case, is Nike. We chased Nike from the US to Taiwan, to Korea, to Indonesia, to Vietnam, to Bangladesh. every time the workers just about got some rights, they would just leave. And so that's on the manufacturing side. They have that luxury of going where they want to be so they could do whatever they can get away with. With mining companies and oil companies, you're somewhat limited in that you have to operate where the resources are. So Glencore, for example, is a notoriously horrible company. They were involved with paramilitary groups in Colombia. They're doing horrible things in Bolivia. You could chart their progress around the world wherever they're operating, except if, I mean, their headquarters is in Switzerland, so they got to follow the laws there. But I've yet to meet a company that doesn't follow that granite rule that they're going to do whatever they can get away with. Now take a look at Apple, thinking of, and Tesla too. Both Apple and Tesla have horrible records, but in California where Apple operates, it's highly regulated. They pay people well. Everyone has a pretty decent conditions of work, and everything's pretty terrific if you're working for Apple in California. You might recall a few years ago that the Apple manufacturing plant for its phone in China, I forget the name of the company, but it was well publicized that the workers were working under such horrible conditions in China. They weren't allowed to take breaks. They were working 20 hours a day. The workers started committing suicide by jumping out of the window. So Tim Cook had to personally go there, and they quickly tried to clean this up and so on. But they were doing what they could get away with, and then the public relations aspect of that got out of control, so they had to dial it down a notch and make things slightly better there. And right now they're allowing children who get maimed and killed to mine cobalt because no one has stopped them there yet. But yeah, that's the code of the corporate community, I'm afraid. I've yet to meet a company, except small companies, that are reacting to this, where the founder of the companies founded the company to be ethical. But the big corporations, I've yet to meet one that ever did anything that they weren't forced to do. And I'm not cynical, I'm just saying that's a fact. I'd love to hear that one of the companies I've sued said, you're right, we can't murder children. Let's figure out a way to fix this. But the phone hasn't rang yet.
Yeah, and then when you visited, were there schools or hospitals or anything that they've built to help the local population? I'm thinking in terms of some of those kids are working there because they need money for their family and so on. But will not be in those companies' best interest to actually, as I said again, build schools, and then so because the picture you have shown, those are kids that I think have not even gone to school or are not going to school. So right. What about their future? It looks like from the get-go they are already disadvantaged to eventually make something out of their lives.
Absolutely. No, they haven't done that yet. In terms of building schools or hospitals, there's no decent medical care. None of these kids got decent medical care. And as I mentioned, they all had to drop out of school because they didn't have the $6 a month to pay for school fees. So that's typically a sort of one of the dirty tricks in the corporate toolbox is at some point under such negative press and pressure that they'll build a school and put a bow on it and say, see how good we are. And people say, see how good they are, but they're still doing the bad acts. And then they're hoping that they'll distract the public from what they're actually doing because they built a school that cost them nothing. But no, they didn't even do that yet. The one thing they've done is that several of the companies, Apple and Dell for sure, contributed a lot of money to a US NGO called PACT, P-A-C-T, that has way more money than it should. And they've built a model mine in the DRC, a small model mine called Matushi, that now the companies that paid money to support it are pointing at it to say, see how good we are? Look, we built a model mine, but don't look at all the rest of the mines because they're horrible. No, they just keep you looking at that model mine. That's another trick in the corporate playbook. So that is unfortunately the reality, and that's why we have to file these cases. I'd like to go out of business and do more hiking in the woods and whatever else brings me joy, but unfortunately we're working way too hard because corporations operating in the global economy will do whatever they can get away with. So maybe that's a good place to stop, unless there's a burning question, but I do appreciate your interest, and please keep in touch with me, and let's talk about unifying those two communities of the diaspora as well as the grassroots organizing in the DRC. And go to my website and you'll be able to keep up with any developments in the case, and we should get that decision very soon.
Well, thank you, Terry. This has been very enlightening, to say the least, and thank you. I know there was one more question in the chat, but maybe you can perhaps answer that separately. But no, it's been interesting, to say the least. I feel like you're doing this as a cause, you know, as a legacy that you're trying to help, you know, those who are less fortunate and who cannot even speak for themselves or fend themselves. So as I was saying in the beginning, it's as if you're going up against, you know, Goliath, so to speak, of the world, and but with faith, and I'm hoping that you'll eventually come, you know. So I don't think you're actually suing them just for the sake of suing. If anything, you're trying to see how can you work with them, right, to make things better. And you know, so as you said, instead of spending billions of dollars on lawyers, well, could that money be used to actually build roads, build school, clean water, and even you know, I do not know what Congolese unemployment rate is. Can you be able to even create an employment services that adults can be able to actually go work there in a better mining condition and so on? All of that's for everyone's good, right? So, and I think that's what you're trying to do. But because I know we can spend money in lawyers and so on, but at the end of the day, is actually have a conversation. What is the social responsibility of those companies to work together for the good of human being, right? So I think, to my knowledge, that's your aim. And I'm hoping that someday those companies will come to that realization as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. And please, let's stay in touch. And I hope I can give you good news very soon. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take
Terry,
care.
for-
Thank you for your attention. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you for everyone that joined. Please look at our website for any more information. We did share the card that you could use to try to contact those companies. Visit whdrc.org, follow our Twitter as well as our Instagram, because we do have many more rooms like this, many more meetings, and it would be good for more Congolese people to participate. Thank you. Larissa, is there anything you would like to add?
And I just wanted to take the time to thank Terry for his time on this Saturday afternoon, and thank you for everybody who signed up. We really do appreciate it. There's a lot of things you could have been doing, but you chose to spend it with us. So that's very, we're really grateful for that. And like Bruce said, just be sure to keep up with our socials. We'll definitely have more forum of this kind coming up in the near future. And with that being said, thank you again.
Wait. Can we start a clubhouse room? I arrived a little late.
Yeah, sure. I'll start one right now.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.